This will be a tutorial on how to install stock klipper on the V400 speeder pad. First, you'll go to the wiki on the left. The link is in the description. You'll need to download the image, the restore image. This image allows you to have SSH access to the speeder pad, and then you'll also need to have the Raspberry Pi imager installed so that you can write the image onto a micro SD card. Now, in this tutorial, I will be skipping through some of the process, just where it's like we're waiting for it to install. So you might see some jumps or cuts in the screen, but generally speaking, it's a continuous process. It will take about an hour, slightly less than an hour, to install the whole process, depending on how fast your internet is, because there's a lot of steps where it's downloading stuff from the internet. Once you have the imager installed and the image downloaded, you'll open the imager. On the middle, you'll choose the operating system. So scroll down to the very bottom, choose use custom, and just choose the image that you downloaded. Then on the very right, you will choose the micro SD card, and be aware that the micro SD card has to be 32 gigs or larger. Now, if you ask you for any like custom settings, press no, and if it asks you, are you sure you want to erase your micro SD card, just press yes. Okay, so this process will take a little while. It'll write the image into the micro SD card, and then it'll verify the image. So once the process is done, just press continue and eject the micro SD card from your computer. Now you will unplug all the USB from your speeder pad and leave just the power jack, and then plug in the micro SD card on the top, and then boot up the printer. There will be like this green bar that runs through, and once it's at the very end, you just turn it off, unplug the micro SD card, and then turn it back on. Once you turn it back on, you'll see the screen on the left top where it says connecting, and it won't be able to connect because it's not the speeder pad's not connected to the printer. So you'll just wait for it. You don't have to do anything, and then after a few minutes, it will show the bottom screen on the left where it says it's unable to connect, and you have these like menus at the bottom. You press menu, and when you go into menu, you'll see the menu on the right where you can select a network. So now you'll connect the speeder pad to your Wi-Fi, and then you will get the IP address of the device on the speeder pad, and that it will be a very important IP address because that's how you will SSH into a device. And so back on your computer, you will open a command prompt, and you'll type in SSH pi at, and then your IP address. Then you'll type in the password. The password is FLSun, and that will allow you to SSH into your speeder pad. Okay, so the next step will be to update all the dependencies so that there aren't any issues, and basically at this point you just copy and paste the commands from the wiki one by one, right? And if it asks you for a password, you just type in FLSun. So once you updated all the dependencies or change the time zone so time on your speeder pad is correct, you reboot and go back SSH back into your speeder pad, and then you'll type the time date command to check which time zone you're currently in. And I found this step to be slightly buggy. Sometimes you'll have to change the time zone multiple times or stuff like that. But basically check which time zone you're in. If it's the wrong one, run the second command and then use the arrow key with enter, and you can choose which continent you're on and which city you're in. So once you select the correct city, you'll have to run the time date command again to check to make sure that the right city is selected. And you'll see here that even though I selected my city, it's still showing the old city for some unknown reason. So what you can do is you can exit out of SSH and go back in to check if it's actually changed, or maybe there's just some delay or something like that. If it still shows the wrong time zone, what you can do is set to a different city and then set back to a city that you want. So I found this step to be slightly buggy. Just give it a few tries. Then after that, you will change the Wi-Fi location. So this will make your Wi-Fi perform better because there are frequency regulations in different countries. So you'll type the first command to check which time zone you're currently in. So for me, it's correct, but if it's not correct for you, then you will run the next command, which is a sudo cat stuff, which shows you all of the possible Wi-Fi regions that you can set to. So at the very front, you'll have a country code, and then on the very right, it shows you which city it is. So find the city that is yours, and then find the country code for that city, right? Then you will do the next command where you set the country. Now, at the very end, it says FR in the wiki. You'll have to change that to your country code. And then you will check to see if it's now set correctly. Now, if it's set correctly, you'll have to write it into the settings so that it's permanent. And so you'll run through the following command one by one. And remember, the first one that you run, there's like a FR in the middle that you'll have to switch out for your country code. So here, FR, I'll have to switch it out to TW. Okay. And then after that, again, you'll just run the command one by one. The second command, you don't have to change anything. The third command, there is FR in the center, so you do have to change that. I forgot to run that command, but because mine is already set to a correct country region, so it doesn't really matter that I skipped that step. But for you, if it's not the correct region, do remember to run the steps one by one. Okay, once you have all of that set up, you'll delete the FLSun build, and then you'll install the stock clipper. So to delete it, the easiest way is to just use Kuha. So you'll SSH back into your speeder pad and then run the commands again one by one. So this will clone Kuha. It'll basically download Kuha onto your speeder pad, and then you'll run Kuha. So once you run Kuha, it'll tell you about you have all these stuff already installed. Those are like custom builds from FLSun, which we don't want. So we'll go into option 3 to remove it, and we'll remove it in the order that the wiki tells us to. So you'll first remove number 10, which is the streamer that deals with the webcam, and then you'll delete the clipper screen, which is the UI that gets displayed on the speeder pad, and then you'll delete mainsail, which is the server, the UI for the server, the web UI for clipper. And then after mainsail is deleted, you will delete Moonraker, which is the actual server that runs on clipper. Okay, and then lastly you will delete clipper, right? Okay, so once all of this is done, you'll type B and then Q, and so you'll exit off Kuha, and then you'll run these following commands. These commands just basically delete some logs and configuration files that might not be deleted by Kuha. So you'll just run these 4 commands one by one. Okay, once you're done that, you'll go to the next step, which is to install an official build or the stock clipper. Depending on how many instances you want, you might open a different tab. So here I'm only installing one instance, so I'm going to follow these steps. And you basically reopen Kuha or relaunch Kuha, and then you'll go into option 1 for install. And so you'll type 1, enter, and then by default it'll install Clipper with Python 3, which is recommended. So you just press enter, and then by default it'll be one instance, so you just press enter, and that will install Clipper onto your speeder pad. And this install process does take a while because I have to download a bunch of stuff and install a bunch of things. So on the right, you'll see that it's running through these commands and running through installs. What you're seeing is not the full process. I've cut out a lot of the waiting, and I'm kind of like skipping through it, but it gives you a rough idea of what will happen. Okay, so once that is done, you will install Moonraker by typing 2, enter. And if it asks you if you want to install Moonraker, just press Y enter, or just press enter. By default it's yes, and so that will install Moonraker, which is the server that will allow you to access Clipper through a UI like mainsail and Clipper screen. Right. And so again, this will also run through for some time, and you'll just basically wait for it. And sometimes it'll look like it's kind of like frozen or it's stopped at a step for a very long time. Just be patient. It is installing. Some of these things are quite large or whatever. It just takes time. Okay, so once Moonraker installed, you'll install mainsail, which is the web UI that connects you to Clipper. So you just type 3, enter, and if we ask you for macros, type N, enter, because when we do the configuration, we'll install the macros ourselves, because the macros for a Delta printer is slightly different, right? And mainsail will be quite fast, and then when installing Clipper screen, we'll install a custom version, so we'll type B enter, Q enter, and that will bring us out of Kuha. And then we'll run the commands on the left one by one. First one downloads the custom build of Clipper screen, and then moves that custom build to the correct location with the correct file folder name, and then the last command runs the installer for that custom build. The reason we need a custom build of Clipper screen is because the V400 is a Delta printer, and the Delta printer, some of the macros and settings are slightly different from a Cartesian printer, so that's why we need a custom build that is meant for the V400. Now the Clipper screen install is going to take quite a long time, so you just wait for it. So once Clipper screen is installed, you'll run the following command for the G-code and then sudo reboot. The G-code command is just so that when you plug in a USB onto your USB drive in the USB port, it shows up in the print menu, and then you'll reboot. And once you reboot, you will open a new tab in your browser, type in the IP address of your printer, and then that will open up the mainsail web UI that allows you to access your printer settings and configurations. Okay, so on the right you'll see that I have my mainsail UI, and then on the left of that web UI you'll have the menus, which have the machine tab, and you go to the machine tab, moonraker.conf, and then you just copy the whole code section and then paste that into the end of the file, and then press save and restart. So the next step is to install the firmware on the mainboard, and this you only need to do once, so in the future if you want to reinstall or whatever, you don't have to redo this step. For the mainboard, the stock should be the MKS Robin Nano V2, and I believe that's the stock version that comes with all V400s. If you're using like a custom mainboard or whatever, you have to choose something else. Right? So again, SSH into it and then run the commands one by one. And when you run this menu config, it'll show this like options where you can use the arrow keys and enter keys to navigate around this menu, and you just basically change the settings so that it matches the screenshot of the settings for your mainboard. Now here mine already match, so I don't really have to change anything because I've done this before. But if it's your first time doing it, a lot of the options won't be the same and you'll have to change a lot of them. So just make sure you go through each option and they match the one on the screenshot, right, on the wiki. So once you've done all the configuration, you press Q and then Y to save the configuration. So once you have your options configured, you'll compile the firmware. So you just do make clean and then make, and this will compile the firmware. And this will take a little while, so you'll just wait for it. Okay, so once it's compiled, you'll convert that file into a bin file, and then you'll have to pull that bin file out of the speeder pad so that you can put it onto a micro SD card. Now, because SSH is kind of like a terminal where you can't really copy files, we're going to open another command prompt, and then we're going to use a command called scp, which allows us to copy files over a SSH connection. Okay, so all we do is type scp space pi at, and then the IP address for your printer, and then colon, and the file that you want. So the directory plus the file name and the file extension. So the directory will be the home pi klipper out, and then the file will be Robin Nano 35.bin, right? And then your space, the destination of where you want to copy it to on your local computer, and it's easiest to just put it in the C drive, and then it will ask you for your password, type it in, and because the file is like 25 KB, is really small, it's basically instant, and then that copies the file out onto your C drive or wherever you defined you designated to copy it to, right? So you'll put this file, the bin file, onto a micro SD card. Now on the wiki, it suggests that you use a micro SD card that is like 128 megs or 256 megs, but these are like quite uncommon. It's fine if you have like 16 or 32. I've tried it and it works fine, but if you only have like 125 gigs or 256 gig SD cards, you might not want to use it as is. So what you can do is you can use a tool that is called disk management on Windows, and you can partition your micro SD card so that it has like a 128 megabyte partition, so it acts like a small SD card. So just right click on your start menu, there's an option called disk management, and if your micro SD card is already plugged into your computer, you should be able to see it. All right, so you just look for it, right click that SD card, and then press delete volume. This will delete all the information from the card. Okay, so it will warn you, you just press yes. And once that's deleted, you'll see that it says unallocated. You right click, new simple volume, next, and then just type 128, right? And that will create a partition that is 128 megabytes, and that makes the SD card act like a smaller SD card. Okay, you can change that. It's fine to just use the default settings, right? And then just press next, finish, and you'll see that it creates a 128 megabyte partition for that SD card. Okay, and then you just put your bin file into the SD card, and then take the SD card and plug it into your mainboard on your printer. Okay, so you'll turn off your printer, take off the top of the lid, and then you'll see a slot where you can input your micro SD card, push it in, and then you'll basically just turn on the printer, and you'll see that the logo on the front will flash a few times, and then it'll stay steadily on, and that basically tells you you've successfully flashed the mainboard. And just to be safe, maybe wait 1 or 2 seconds after it stays steady, right? And then the next thing you'll do is you'll download the configuration files for klipper, so that you configure klipper for the V400, and you just download the files and you extract them. So once the files are extracted, you will open mainsail by typing the IP address of your speeder pad into your browser. Then go to the left menu, select machine, and here is where you will upload your configuration files. Now the configuration files will be dependent on the mainboard that you have. For the stock printer, it should be the Robin Nano V2. So you just go into the folder extracted, into configurations, and you'll see a V400, and you'll see a bunch of folders. And in these folders, you want to choose MKS Robin Nano 2.0 stock. Now, if you're using other print mainboards, choose the other folders. Now, in this folder, you'll have all these files. These are the configurations for your printer, and so you'll simply just select all the files and then drag it into mainsail to upload it to the speeder pad. So these are configurations specific for the V400 and specific to your mainboard. So once all the configurations are uploaded, you will shut down your klipper pad, plug in the USB to the printer, and then reboot your printer and speeder pad. Now once it's printed, you'll need to get the serial number or the USB serial from the speeder pad, so that the speeder pad knows which device to send the commands to. So you just wait for the printer to boot up, and then you'll SSH back into the printer, and then you'll run the command that says cdls, the serial ID by ID, and that should give you a single line of serial number. Right? If you have multiple printers on one speeder pad, you might have multiple, and then if that's the case, then run the second command that says lsdev whatever. So all you have to do is highlight whatever shows up, right click, that will copy. Then you will go into your mainsail, go into the machine tab, and you'll find printer.cfg, and then in this file press Ctrl F to go find, and you type in serial and press next until you find the part that says MCU serial and then bunch of X. Replace that bunch of X with a serial that you got from your SSH terminal, and once you've done that, you press save and restart. And so once that has restarted, your speeder pad should now have a working klipper screen, and everything should be working as is. So at this point, you have a working printer. Now there are some last steps, additional configurations that you can do to like add website support, add stuff like that. Now if you don't really care about these, you can skip the additional configurations, but I do recommend that you go through them, at least the fix shutdown button, the webcam support, exclude object support, and the klipper TMC. Now if you don't use the Neolite or Big Tree Komi, then you can skip those. And once you've done that, you'll go through the printer calibration steps, and once it's calibrated, you can basically print as normal.